In 2011, after significant rumors and speculation in the gaming press, Nintendo released the 3DS, a glasses-free 3D gaming experience. And much like the DSi and the later Wii U, the 3DS shipped with its own camera, a decision so obvious at the time that it hardly seemed worth mentioning. But this particular device had not one, not two, but three camera sensors built into the console, enabling the capture of photos in stereoscopic 3D. And thus was born a new era of wiggle GIFs, cosplay photography, and all the creative energy you could pack into 0.3 megapixels. In this episode, we're going to look at the 3DS camera, as well as stereoscopic images more broadly, including things like Avatar and even Spy Kids 3D, as well as the surprising resurgence of the wiggle GIF aesthetic long after the 3DS had faded from public view. So let's do this. William, welcome back to the computer lab.
I'm back.
You're back. I have 3 words for you.
Ooh.
Glasses on, motherfucker.
Ooh, here we go. Wow, this is some tight packaging. Oh, goodness. Oh, that's intense.
Small. There,
that's intense.
Isn't this the worst?
Oh, this sucks. It sucks.
Okay, you can take them off anytime.
Oh, my goodness. That hurts. Okay. Holy.
I did not mind these at all when I was 8.
Yeah.
These are brutal.
Oh my goodness.
And I really wanted to open this video being like, hey, these aren't that bad.
Yeah.
No, they're bad. My question for you, have you ever taken a photo on your 3DS?
Yes, I have. Not too frequently, but I actually went back to my history of photos on my 3DS, and I had forgotten that about a decade ago, my friends were like toying around with the camera on my 3DS. So they have a bunch of photos of themselves and like one video clip of me, I think, that shows up at like the very end.
Nice. So yeah, 3DS photography is the title of this video and the subject of this video. So we're going to talk about what is perhaps the most popular 3D camera ever produced. A lot of companies over the years have tried and failed to make 3D cameras a thing. At the consumer level, it's never really worked. And I don't know how many people actually use the 3DS camera. You know, I don't think you're alone in saying you never really used it.
Yeah.
It went in people's pockets. They brought it with them to conventions to do street passes.
Oh, yeah.
And as they say in photography, the best camera is the one you have on you. And often that was the thing. Let me read you some specs about the 3DS camera.
Ooh, okay.
The 3DS line of consoles each have 3 cameras, 1 front-facing and 2 rear-facing. So far, so good. Mm-hmm. And each camera has a 0.3 megapixel sensor and an aperture of f2.85, which aperture is kind of murky when we're getting with sensors this small, but 0.3 megapixels. How does that sound to you?
I'm trying to think, because usually I'm pretty sure like the megapixels like tried to push in recent years have been like at least single digits and not like decimals. Numbers.
Yeah. So high def video is 2 megapixels. Mm-hmm. For still photography, I mean, a DSLR from like 10 years ago would be 12 megapixels. A lot of phones now have 20 megapixel things. A webcam is about a third of it. So this is like 1/3 of a megapixel.
Goodness.
It's about a webcam from the 90s.
Yeah.
Or actually, webcams really haven't improved. It's like a webcam. And the reason I'm so excited to talk about this is that 3D photography is as old as photography itself. According to Britannica, it was like all the rage of, and I shit you not, the 1850s. 3D photography was a really big deal.
Wow.
And it's because, you know, all you need to do to take a 3D photo is get 2 cameras, put them next to each other, snap a photo. You can use some sort of mirror contraption to kind of get it closer than the camera bodies would allow otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a gimmick that's kind of come and gone over the years. So anyway, lots of great 1800s era photos.
Ooh.
Before we go further, what's your opinion of 3D cinema?
Yeah, I've had, I think we're going to go into the weeds of it for sure. But, because of the marketing and like the promotion and just like materially like how perception was surrounding 3D, like when like Spy Kids 3D came out, everyone, like all the promotional trailers were like, whoa, this is like hands reaching out and grabbing you. And it's like a big, like scary thing. And it's like you're like interacting with the movie, like this, static format. And like you're watching on a like 2-dimensional plane and everything, but it's like, no, it's reaching into the 3rd dimension, and it's like such a like trippy thing. But definitely at the time it's like, oh, look at the appeal of, it's more about like some throwaway novelty than like some kind of like added, enriching great element that's going to be like, a cinema wide thing. But yeah, then like several years later, there were talks about like, oh, Avatar in
Avatar
3D.
after that, yeah.
And it's like, what's that going to be like? They're like, are they going to start like performatively like doing the same kind of crap? And it's like, no, it's like a modern take on like 3D. So you have like a more defined sense of like depth perception and everything. And it's like, oh, that's a kind of elaborate little detail. But yeah, it's unconventional, but it can be interesting.
Wow, I'm glad you said all that because you said it a lot more eloquently and condensed than I would have because my notes go on for pages and pages. 3D movies go back to around the 40s because you need color to accomplish a 3D movie. Yeah. So basically right away there's a movie called House of Wax, not to be confused with the remake. It's a 3D movie. It's actually the Anaglyph.
Yeah.
So yeah, in our lifetime it was Spy Kids 3D and then it was Avatar and then everyone got really upset at Avatar and then it stopped. It's sort of the bare bones of it. So with Spy Kids 3D, things are coming out of the screen at you. Right? 3D cinema has kind of moved away from things like that, sort of to its detriment. And there's a sort of contradiction that there's an essay, I believe, from the 80s called The Aesthetics of Emergence. And it means emerge, like literally things emerging from the screen. And the point is that if you go to a 3D cinema and you put on the fucking glasses and you give yourself a headache, you want that effort to be paid off. And so you want the movie to have stuff jump out at you. The problem with that, according to this essay, is that you can't do like a serious dramatic film when you're wearing the glasses because people need stuff to come out of the screen and which is literally what Avatar is. I mean, there's a few moments in I've actually never seen the first Avatar in 3D, but I saw the sequel in 3D and there was maybe one moment in the film where someone's like pointing an arrow and the arrowhead's coming at you, right? But other than that, like it was very toned down. Not a lot was happening with the 3D effect. It added, as you say, a bit of depth, but it wasn't like stuff was coming out of the screen at you. And that contradiction is frustrating for a number of reasons because I like when stuff comes out of the screen. Otherwise, I wouldn't go see 3D movies, right? Well, here's the thing. There's 3D technology in a vacuum. Like, let's say best case scenario, you go to CES, you see a 3D TV, the best settings, Dolby, whatever, like up to snuff, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then there's whatever the fuck happens at Cineplex, which is run by underpaid high schoolers who are being paid minimum wage. I don't know if you know this, the entirety of the region from Niagara to Toronto, that whole, I think they call it the Golden Horseshoe, that whole region has one projectionist for Cineplex.
Oh, God.
So if something goes wrong with a projector in a serious way, or the projector's not calibrated, which tends to happen a lot, there's no one on site. And if someone has to come down, it'll take 4 hours because the guy's at home sleeping. He's drinking martinis by the pool. So 3D projectors in cinemas, at least in our case, are not set up well. There's some statistic. SMPTE, I don't know if you know what SMPTE is. They're basically responsible for like policing time code.
Oh, okay.
So like the little clapboards with the lights on them and the numbers. So SMPTE is the company that regulates that. They said that you need a screen brightness of 14 to 16 foot Lamberts. Anyway, whatever the case, 14 to 16 of whatever those are is the brightness you need to make a 3D effect work. What most cinemas actually have is 4.5 foot Lamberts. So that's generously a quarter to a fifth of the actual brightness required.
Goodness, yeah.
3D cinemas are not up to par with what would need to happen for a convincing effect. And frankly, theaters don't care. the theater experience right now is very low quality on top of other issues. I regularly have like hot take film conversations with people, as you can imagine. And across the board, I find almost everyone hates 3D. I don't know if this is your experience.
I have a very kind of neutral reaction to it because I'm not bothered that it exists. And I think you're saying you really want like stuff to come out at you and like you want that kind of experience. Like I think if something is tailored to that and like want to try some kind of experimental thing like that, by all means let them. You're playing with the medium in like a new kind of innovative way. And yeah, I'm neutral to it, I guess. Like I've never been wholly like that bothered by it, I want to say. But yeah, kind of similarly, and I wish we in Canada got like the full extent of it. I saw Gemini Man. Which was like a big kind of technical accomplishment, and it was shot in 120 frames per second.
Really high frame rate,
But Canada didn't get access to the 120 version. We got like at most 60, I believe. Formally, I think like it was using that technology in really fascinating ways, like the way some of the textures came alive and like played into some of the thematics of the film about like identity, and viscerally some of the images really came to life. I was like, wow, this is like really cool. So 3D in itself, I'm like, I don't care about 3D as much, but like the high frame rate and stuff Ang Lee's doing and all this sort of stuff, I'm definitely open to it if you can like utilize it in a very enriching way.
So you saw it just like in a normal screening, essentially.
Yeah. So like it was a specialty screening because I think they still offered like the standard 24 frame versions in some cases, but I saw like a 60 frame one.
Got half of the experience.
Half of it, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that about, the lack of cinemas that do that in Toronto area, right? I forget which essay this was. I'll quote it on screen. But what someone supposes is that George Lucas was enormously frustrated when he was making the prequels that he couldn't get theaters to project digitally. The industry, as I said, there's one projectionist for all of Niagara to Toronto. These theater chains are enormously reluctant to replace their equipment, which kind of makes some amount of sense. I don't, they're just so enormously greedy that it's hard for me to feel sympathy. But the idea is that, like, if you want to replace every projector in Ontario, it's going to be enormously expensive, right? So they're very reluctant to do it. And George Lucas was begging people to digitally screen Star Wars. No one would. Phantom Menace was projected digitally in only 4 theaters in the United States.
Oh, goodness.
Attack of the Clones, he's like, this is going to be in 2,000 theaters. It did not. It played in 70 theaters. And by the third movie, that number had gone up to like 85 or something. So he thought he was like 2,000 theaters. And then the American film industry was like, here's 90.
Oh, boy.
Really unfortunate, because if you think about it, Attack of the Clones is a movie that exists inside a computer, right? Yeah. Fundamentally. And just like to put that back onto 35 millimeter film stock and get the color timing right, because, celluloid fucks up the colors if you just directly transfer a clean image. Yeah. And then like just a fucking nightmare. So anyway, that's fun. So, okay, this is Belton writes, in 2004, it had become obvious to key industry advocates of digital technology, such as, you won't be surprised by this at all, James Cameron, George Lucas, and actually this one's a surprise, Jeffrey Katzenberg, CEO of DreamWorks Animation.
Yeah.
Okay, that last one was a surprise. Anyway, advocates of digital cinema. It was no surprise to them that the digital revolution had stalled, in part because it had little or no novelty value. In an attempt to compensate for this problem, proponents of digital cinema have attempted to give digital cinema a novelty phase through the hybrid technology of digital 3D. I don't know if I agree with that. That seems like kind of a fucking conspiracy theory. Because I don't know if George Lucas wants to replace all the projectors in the United States, I don't know if he'd go out of his way to pressure James Cameron to make Avatar, which cost a fuck ton of money to make. It seems weird to me to suggest that because he's so upset about the film grain that he's going to give $1 billion to James Cameron. This seems like a weird conspiracy theory. I don't know if that's the true purpose, but I think there is truth in it insofar as 3D cinema like Avatar, it forced theater chains to use digital projectors, if that makes sense. Because I don't think you could project Avatar on 35 millimeter film stock, but we are living in a post-Avatar world, and basically all the projectors are digital now, which is great for people who like digital images. I mean, obviously there's some diehards who love 35 millimeter screenings, but I think if movies continue to be shot digitally, they might as well be distributed digitally. That makes some amount of sense to me. My frustration with 3D is that the vast majority of 3D movies that come out now are not shot in 3D. They're filmed in 2D and then post-converted, which is literally like you pay a bunch of VFX artists, essentially minimum wage, to trace the character, like the actor in the frame, and then simulate depth. What I would compare it to is it's like you're looking into a diorama or it's like Paper Mario. Paper Mario is probably the best comparison because there is depth, but all the individual planes are flat. So the actor looks like they're at a certain spot in the stage, but they look like a paper cutout of the actor. If you haven't seen a movie that was really shot in 3D, and I actually made a list of all the movies I like that were 3D, and there are 2 of them. So that's fun. But
extensive list.
It's an extensive list. So I think 3D is fantastic for particles. If you see snow or rain in 3D, fucking incredible. Beautiful. So good. Okay, good examples of 3D. Baz Luhrmann's Gatsby, which was shot in 3D. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and that's it.
1, 2.
Yeah. And so I am very defensive of 3D, and I think we agree on this, which is basically what you said earlier. It's a tool like anything else. Yeah. Color can be used badly, right? Yeah. And so, I'm out here defending 3D. I'm also out here saying there's only 2 good 3D movies, but most movies are bad, and there's nothing I can do about that. How's that for a hot take?
Great segue.
Here's a hot take paragraph I wrote when I was really angry and doing research on this, because every article made me furious, because it's all just critics that hate 3D. They hate anything that doesn't look like Gone with the Wind. If you have too many cuts, they get angry. If you have too many sound effects, they get angry. I hate everybody. And Roger Ebert has some hot takes on 3D that I didn't love. I do love Roger Ebert, but he was wrong about this. So here's my sentence that I wrote while angry. I've calmed down a bit. Sure, you can call 3D a gimmick if you want. The same can be said of Steadicam, intercutting, digital projection, color, surround sound, voiceover, subjective cameras, harsh lighting, surrealism, the Strasberg method, etc. Let's just never have fun or experiment in any way ever again. Ooh. What do you think of that?
Slamming. I love it.
Because, like voiceover can be used to horrible effect to deliver exposition. It can also be used really well.
And I mean, just the whole culture around talkies for a while was like, it was such a weird gimmicky thing. Like, this is, not what fundamentally what cinema is anymore. And
I mean, to your point, I think what we're dancing around is that everything's a gimmick until determined otherwise. Or every gimmick goes up to this branching path where it's like, do you become normalized or do you become smell-o-vision, right? And so I don't think every movie will eventually be 120 FPS. That's a tool that a director can use if they wish to, right?
Yeah.
But at one point, as you say, talkies were a gimmick. Fast cuts were a gimmick in the 80s because of MTV. Yeah, color was a gimmick, right? So I think a big part of this problem is that the vast majority of movies that are exhibited in 3D are shot in 2D and then they pay someone to cut it out of the frame. So that's frustrating. And that's most people's experience with 3D. I was very frustrated when Spider-Verse came out, which was it's a 3D animated movie. So they render it with 2 cameras. So it's properly 3D. Even the line work, how there's Illustrator lines. Yeah. That was actually done in Maya with the pen tool. So those exist in 3D.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool. So the 3D effect in that movie, phenomenal, right? And I was begging people where I worked at the time. I was like, you have to see this in 3D. They're like, no, I saw Ant-Man in 3D and it was bad. That's my impression of normies. And I get that impulse. Most movies that come out are bad. Most 3D movies that come out do not use the technology well. This movie, I promise you, the sense of depth, the way it all connects, is a phenomenal looking movie. And so I remember one person in particular, who's someone I respect a lot. They avoided the 3D screening. And then after the movie was done in theaters, they followed up with me and they're like, yeah, I heard on a podcast that actually the 3D was really good. I wish I'd seen it. And I was like, I was begging you. I was throwing bills at you. Yeah. I was throwing coins at you, begging to pay the upcharge, see it in 3D. Anyway, so that's fun. I really have to stop myself from talking more about 3D movies because I have an awful lot to say. But there is I guess the next part of this video, we have to address the question of how do you view 3D content? How do you display 3D images or even 3D films on a 2D display? And one of the historical answers was the anaglyph. I'm going to play the Mega Race clip from Spy Kids 3D, and you only have to watch as much as you can handle.
All right. Is my offer. Let's go in on this.
See how it comes at you.
Yeah, I can see it a little bit. Oh.
The number? Yeah.
Yeah, numbers a little bit. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and glasses off time.
Oh, goodness.
So that was fun. So that's the Mega Race scene. I guess what I really want to display here is how do you show 3D images on a 2D screen? Because if you take a photo, you want some sense of how am I going to show this to people? With the 3DS, it's do I just show my 3DS to everyone to display my photography work? Yeah. It's a weird premise. So Anaglyph 3D, which is the cyan and red glasses. The biggest problem with this, I would say, the blue's not that bad. The red is brutal.
Yeah.
And so you got one eye that's having an okay time, another eye that's not having a good time.
No.
So I guess I want to raise this question. How do you view, or what do you do with 3DS pictures that you take on your Nintendo 3DS family of consoles? And one of the famous ones, I just want to jump right into it, is called Wiggle GIFs. Have you seen these?
No.
So there's a Tumblr blog, Fuck Yeah 3DS Photography. I'm going to show you some of the highlights, all right? Also, I guess, content warning up front. There's going to be a lot of flashing images at this next portion of the podcast. So if you're at all sensitive to flickering images, feel free to listen to the audio version of the show or just skip this episode because there's some pretty severe flickering in this.
That is fair. Beauty.
This is one of the I don't think it's John Flansburgh, but it's one of the other guys of They Might Be Giants. So this is taking, it's obvious what it is, but I'll over-explain it anyway. A 3D image is 2 separate images taken a roughly eye-length parallax apart, and this is just flickering between the 2 images at full res and in normal color, and it doesn't really give an illusion of depth, but it kind of looks cool. It's just showing both images really quickly, and these are all from the Fuck Yeah 3DS Photography blog. This is very 2012, which is why I wanted to bring it up. This just looks like we've gone back 10 years in time. And I'll show some of my personal work. This one's got you in it. So the wiggle's pretty aggressive here.
Yeah.
But this one didn't work out quite as much, but there's you.
Good old high school days.
It was 2 days after Steve Jobs passed away, and this was the Apple Store in the Eaton Center in Toronto. Ooh. People were putting up their commemorative little Post-its. It's funny how much people used to love Steve Jobs. I think the tide has turned, but we used to all kind of love CEOs.
Yeah.
That is no longer the case.
No.
But I think it's funny that after Steve Jobs died, people were being sad about it. Here's some Anime North stuff. Parallax on these, not great. Nintendo actually recommends in one of their PDFs on their website, you want to be about a foot away or a meter away from what you're taking a photo of. This obviously, hundreds of meters away, so that's unfortunate. Oh, here's one where I had a finger covering one of the lenses because I shoot on the 2DS, which you can't see in 3D while you're photographing.
Oh, goodness.
So one camera, this is a straight-on strobe, but yeah. So one of the lenses is completely obstructed. The reason I want to bring up all this wiggle GIF stuff is that it's sort of a McLuhan-esque solution, or it's a McLuhan-esque problem with a very DIY solution. How do we view 3D images on a 2D screen? Just fucking flicker back and forth between them. We'll figure it out later. Here's the thing. I would say the 3DS as a console kind of faded away by like 2014. Wow. That's maybe me being a little harsh. The 3DS famously had a very rocky start, and they had to like lower the price, and that made a lot of fans angry. So they're like, "Here's some free Fire Emblem games." It got really weird.
Yeah.
So a while ago, I did some research on 3DS photography for a different video that's long gone now, and that video was terrible. But I made that video around 2016, and I was like, "What was the deal with Wiggle GIF?" I said it in the Jerry Seinfeld voice. What's the deal with Wiggle? So I was kind of wondering about this format that made me nostalgic because I thought it was kind of big in 2013, and then 3DS photography blogs sort of faded away. Which is all to say, when I was doing my research for the last video, little did I know that almost immediately after I made that video, Wiggle GIFs would come back. So Wiggle GIFs had like a weird resurgence in the late 2010s. Starting with this video, so this is Mura Masa, which I don't know anything about, but I believe he's an EDM artist from Guernsey, which is an island outside the UK, which actually is where my family is from. Little fun fact. So Mura Masa, there's this video where they incorporate wiggling sort of as part of the music video. It becomes a trend. This other like hip hop group uses it. UFO 361 makes a video that like really popularizes the look. So there's a string of popular uses in music videos of this effect, and you start to see YouTube tutorials like what the fuck is this effect and how do they do it. A lot of this is being accomplished with nicer, well, it's not being done literally with the 3DS, but there's some film cameras that shoot 3D where it just exposes multiple strips at a time. Those work really well. It just burns through film quickly. But anyway, we're gonna watch this until we get to the Wiggle GIF part. Sounds like Animal Crossing music. There it is. All right, we'll pause. So what'd you think of that?
Yeah, I definitely, watching the like single images sustained over a long time is like definitely a bit grating, but like seeing it within these like, it's all about like the small burst of like the wiggle, and that's kind of the novelty of it in succession for sure.
Oh, yeah, sort of the joy of wow, this is such an obvious thing to say, but I guess we're in it now. Still photography captures an instance in time, whereas video does not. It's a sustained moment. But a wiggle photo, it's motion and it's video. It's video-ish, but it's capturing an exact moment in time.
Yeah.
So like if some of the best wiggle GIFs I've seen are like particles, like someone like blowing like smoke or like blowing like confetti at you. And it's that exact moment, the confetti's in that exact spot and you're like wiggling around it. It's like bullet time from the Matrix. It's sort of almost that.
Yeah.
It's a neat little effect. Interestingly, this video, What If I Go? The video was directed by Yoni Lapin, but the wiggle GIFs were actually directed by a completely different person. So they commissioned Salim Adam to do these wiggle GIFs, and he just has this like enormous portfolio of like wiggle photography. And he's done like stuff for really big brands like Nike, ASAP Rocky, Havana Club. I don't actually know what that is, but like some pretty big stuff. Salim also shot a campaign for Nando's, which is exciting. I love me some Nando's, but the stuff he did for that was, I don't know why this happened, but it was in the wiggle GIF style, but it was actually just like full motion video that had some frames removed. So it was like, what am I even trying to say? It's not even like anything was sped up. It's just like freeze frame effect. I don't know, really strange. So for some reason they abandoned the effect for that. But Salim Adams, they have this enormous portfolio. I guess that was their thing for a while, was doing these sort of wiggle GIFs, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, as you say, it's a moment in time that's sort of stretched out rather than just holding on a static photo is brutal in a music video. Oh, so 3D Porch I mentioned earlier. It was like a social network for 3D photographers that I believe went online before the 3DS came out, but it was like so niche. And then when the 3DS came out, a huge spike in traffic. Suddenly everyone wants it. And what this website does is it lets you share 3D photos, and it also provides a service for converting them to wiggle GIFs, Anaglyph 3D, and you can also browse the site on your 3DS, click on a photo, and view it in 3D.
That's really extensive. Wow.
Which is pretty slick. I'm going to load up the archive. So the website's gone now, but the creator archived some of it. So Phil Dingra made this site, and he is a programmer who made like a cloud notes app for the iPhone. That's not important right now, but you can browse around. So everything on the site, if you view it on a normal computer, is a wiggle GIF. And as you can imagine, a lot of the photos on this site, even when it was at its like height of popularity, it was photos of amiibos and it was cosplayers, and that was it. People would bring their 3DS to conventions, as you say, for Street Pass.
Yep.
Cosplay, like this is an amazing example of like using depth for a cosplay photo. So Phil Dingra made this site and quickly realized that like a Web 2.0 site where users upload their own content is enormously expensive to host. So he shut down the site after a certain point in time, basically just because it ran out of money. There's also Stereotastic. So this went up to replace 3D Porch after it shut down. The upload functionality on the site is currently broken. So the most recent photo, I think, is from like 2016 or something. Oh, 2017.
Beauty.
So it does the wiggle GIF thing. I think that's kind of fun. So yeah, what I wrote here. I love 3D images. In recent years, the tech has been eclipsed by VR, which is steadily becoming semi-popular. But I find that too immersive. I don't want to go all the way. I just like a little bit of depth. But it seems like we got all or nothing at the moment. So how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see like what kind of new innovations we have to enriching our medium, but it can definitely be a fraud and, sometimes scary, sometimes very weird time, but for better or worse, it's it's a sign of adaptation and experimentation, and got to see what lies beyond sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like gimmicks, let's say we're calling it a gimmick and we're being uncharitable. It is a gimmick, but it's one that's not going away. It starts in 1850, then House of Wax almost 100 years later in 1940. And then like in the 80s, there was a big boom with things like one of the Friday the 13th sequels was in 3D.
Oh, yeah.
Then you got the early 2000s Spy Kids. After that, you got Avatar, Hugo, all those guys. 3D's not going away forever. It's going to keep coming back in waves, maybe in nostalgia waves. And the 3DS is the exact moment in time where Nintendo put a 3D camera in your pocket. Did anyone use it well? Who's to say? Probably not. But the wiggle GIFs inspired their own sort of aesthetic principle for like music videos. And I don't think that's going away because the ability to freeze a moment in time and wiggle it around. People do that now with like photogrammetry, but it's a cool little effect with multi-lens cameras. Anyway, yeah, I think it's a good note to leave it on. Where is this all going? We don't know, and I'm excited to find out.
Beauty.
Anyway, as always, welcome to the Computer Lab. As always, this was Computer Lab. I am Nathan, and thanks for watching.
Take care. Woo.